The Philadelphia 76ers continue attempting to stay afloat in the absence of Joel Embiid while rounding out the roster for a potential playoff push. Well, a key player could have just become available as the buyout market looks a little more intriguing. Just last night, it was announced that by ESPN sources that Detroit Pistons center Mike Muscala is finalizing a contract buyout, clearing the way for him to be eligible for the playoffs with his next team. Muscala has interest from a few contenders. So there's plenty of history here between Mike Muscala and the Sixers. He spent some time in a Sixers uniform, and of course, Tyrese Maxey is only here because of Mike Muscala, which I will dig into a little deeper. But this is also an opportunity where it makes sense for the Sixers. We can see very clearly that there is no trust in Mo Bamba. For the past few games, we've seen Nico Batum serve as the backup center for the Sixers as Paul Reed continues to start in Joel Embiid's absence. Mo Bamba, to his credit, did play pretty well against the Boston Celtics last night. I thought he had a nice matchup against Luke Cornett and did some damage, particularly that jump shot continues to be legitimate. But there still are some frustrations within his game, and as the Sixers roster looks at a whole, there still is an available roster spot to bring on a player like Mike Muscala. That at the trade deadline, it was clear the Sixers were looking to shed salary, shed roster opportunities in preparations for keeping all options open as the buyout market began to establish itself. One of those examples was trading Jaden Springer away for a second-round pick. Sixers did get a chance to look at Jaden Springer last night, not until garbage time when the game was essentially over, but he is kind of in that mix for the Celtics, and we'll see how things ultimately shake out there. But you only do those types of moves if the expectation is to bring in players. Some of those have already been proven. Kyle Lowry, example, is a guy that they did bring in through the buyout market and has looked pretty solid in a Sixers uniform so far. But Mike Muscala is a clear option that I think does make sense. Now, we did get this notification from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points. It says, keep an eye on the 76ers, Thunder, and Suns as three potential landing spots for Mike Muscala. All three teams have an open roster spot and would benefit from adding a big man who can space the floor. A reunion in OKC would be poetic for Muscala. I do agree that I think OKC is probably the biggest threat for the Sixers for bringing in Muscala, but I think it likely becomes down to those two teams for Muscala's choice. Now, I know I touched on Mike Muscala, the story, a little bit. I did want to jump into why this is such a particular part of folklore for the Sixers, and it's also especially cool that Tyrese Maxey is aware of it. That he was asked earlier this year, Tyrese Maxey on the shots from Mike Muscala that gave the Sixers the pick to use him to draft him. Shout out to Mike. I like being there. Now, Tyrese Maxey, of course, is playing incredible. I was particularly impressed with his performance against the Celtics last night. I know, obviously, Boston still got the win and were able to pull away towards the end of the game, but for that first half specifically, and really the game as a whole, there were moments where Tyrese Maxey looked like the straight-up best player on the floor, which is really impressive considering how star-studded that Celtics team is. Particularly the matchup with Jaylen Brown. Thought Maxey was dominant on both sides of the ball, that he was picking his pocket on the defensive end. Thought last night has a strong argument for one of Tyrese Maxey's best defensive performance as a professional, and that is huge when we talk about his ceiling as a player. That I'm ready to say it with my chest that Tyrese Maxey is an above-average defender at this point in time, and I think it's wild that we've gotten there that quickly. The effort was always there for him, but something seems to have clicked this year as far as his understanding of rotations, where to be, how to get his body in front of players, and just like, the effort was always there. There was always so much energy in the way he chased guys around, so I always believed he could get there as a defender, but just his understanding and his movements have gotten so much better this year in a way that I think once again raises his ceiling as a player. Now, to talk on the Mike Muscala story a little more and why Tyrese Maxey is even in a uniform, I had this from Sam DiGiovanni's article from Clutch Points as well. He writes, OKC led for 40 seconds in that game in the bubble, but holding the advantage at the final buzzer meant that the Thunder's draft pick would be the 21st overall. The 76ers went on to pick a wildly skilled guard out of the University of Kentucky who would become an all-star in just his fourth NBA season. Maxey knows that Muscala gave the 76ers that pick that they used on him, and he's very appreciative of it. Embiid refusing to succumb to the monumental stress that he faced early on in his career and developing into arguably the NBA's best player is the most incredible, all-inspiring development in recent 76ers memory. Second only to that are Muscala's heroics, which did nothing but disadvantage his at-the-time team and allow Philadelphia to draft a franchise cornerstone. So very cool the way that shook it out. And once again, just to put a full note on this, which Maxey is aware of this, Darius Bazley was the guy that made the pass to Mike Muscala. And why I think that is particularly poetic in this specific situation is when you look at the Sixers roster at the bottom of it, Darius Bazley is the guy currently on a 10-day contract. I do believe that has essentially been a trial run for Bazley. He has not really received the opportunity that I was hopeful that he might in this shorthanded window. As I mentioned, it's clear there's not a lot of trust in Mo Bamba with them going with Batum in that second unit. But Bazley has not played except for some garbage time opportunities late in games, such as last night against the Celtics. I would have liked to see a little more of what he can actually do. I know there's moments, particularly with that Thunder team, this being back in the point in time before the Thunder are the contenders that they currently are. Bazley played very well for that franchise. But with that particular shot, that Mike Muscala shot, it was passed by Darius Bazley, and now he might need to pass that Sixers roster spot over to Muscala himself. To dive into what Muscala particularly does on the floor, the stats don't blow you off the page that in his career he's played 532 total NBA games, started just 45 of them, 15.3 minutes per game across his career, averaging 6 points, 3.2 rebounds, 2.4 on the defensive side of the ball. He is a 37.6% three-point shooter on 2.6 three-point attempts per game. During his lone season that he spent with the Sixers, he played in 47 games, starting in 6 of those, played 22.1 minutes per game, 7.4 points, 4.3 rebounds, 1.3 assists. Didn't shoot the ball as well in a Sixers uniform, just 34.2% from the beyond the three-point arc on 4.2 attempts per game, which was the career high that he has ever attempted with any team. But with Mike Muscala, you know kind of what you're getting, that he is a true stretch big man in the way that Mo Bamba has kind of worked himself into, but not quite in the same way. And while like Muscala is not a guy that I'm going to call a defensive stalwart by any means, he's a little less frustrating than what we're getting with Bamba. That some of the missed block opportunities from Bamba particularly are driving me to pull my hair out. Now, I don't want to be too hard on Mo Bamba. I think he's a great teammate. He's a guy that I like having around this team. He's the first guy off the bench rooting for guys, cheering for guys, and every time I've seen him do any sort of media availability, very well spoken, a guy that does seem to have a team-first attitude, but the production just has not been to the level that I think we hoped. And I'm not guaranteeing that Mike Muscala is going to be better, but I do think it is worth at least an attempt, that you know what you're getting and more so in the sense from Muscala, and it would be, quite very cool to see him and Maxey sharing the floor together after the story. And just one more note on that was such a meaningless game for Mike Muscala and the Thunder that it was a top 20 protected pick for the Sixers. And by the way, they traded that pick in the deal that sent out Markelle Fultz, or got that pick back in the trade that they sent out Markelle Fultz. So even a little more full circle moment when we talk about the translation from Markelle Fultz, who essentially was supposed to be what Tyrese Maxey currently is, and the way that everything worked itself out there. But Mike Muscala very easily could have just missed one of those shots. We don't have Tyrese Maxey on this Sixers team, and the future looks much darker in the Sixers world. I think there's a real argument to be made that if Mike Muscala does not hit that shot, that if Tyrese Maxey is not selected by the Sixers, that we're talking about fully trading Embiid and rebuilding everything. That's how close we are to that reality, and it is a shout out to Mike that we are not. But when I talk about what he can do on this team, take a look at this depth chart. That Paul Reed is currently the starting center with Joel Embiid out. KJ Martin listed as the second unit starting center. He's been out with an ankle injury these past 2 games. Mo Bamba down at number 3. Darius Bazley at number 4, and Nico Batum at number 5. Now, this is not as much of gospel as it is in other sports. The NFL, for example, that is pretty rigid in what the depth chart is, what the opportunity is. The NBA is more fluent in that kind of setting, and particularly like last night, that even though KJ Martin listed number 2, Mo Bamba is the number 3. It was Nico Batum who's listed in that 5th spot for the center position that got for the first opportunities once Paul Reed was sent to the bench. And by the way, Batum has played pretty solid in it. He's a very intelligent basketball player. I continue to be impressed by the high IQ he plays with, but he's also very limited in things that he can do. And just from a size standpoint, he's 6'8". We saw some Tobias Harris center minutes, saw some Ricky Council center minutes. Each of these guys are 6'8" and below, which is just going to put you at a size disadvantage in the NBA. We continue to see such small lineups with this Sixers team. A ton of 3-guard action, which I understand they're making the most of what they got right now. That there is just not a lot to work with when you look at this current roster, all the injuries, and no Joel Embiid, obviously. But there's been a ton of lineups, whether it's Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey, and DeAnthony Melton. And DeAnthony Melton, by the way, did re-injure that back last night, which is especially concerning. Melton had missed the previous 18 games before returning for the past 3. And for him to re-injure it right away is definitely something that is a long-term concern of mine. Melton's a very important player on this team, probably more important than he should be on a real-deal championship contender. But the way that he is defensive-oriented, the way that he does have a quick trigger from a three-point standpoint, and just the way that he complements guys like Tyrese Maxey, I think is very important to this team. So I do hope DeAnthony Melton can get healthy quick, but they have to find a way to prod on without him one way or another. And I do like that Mike Muscala has a little more size than a lot of these lineup combinations that we're talking about. That even if he's not a guy that brings some of the true center traits, when we're talking about just matching up with some of these guys, the Al Horfords of the world, the Kristaps Porzingis, being able to put a hand in their face from the perimeter at eye level is a little more effective than when you have Tobias Harris rotating out there. And Tobias continues on his concerning level of play, I guess I'll put it that way. Probably, I would say, the worst stretch of basketball that he's played in his career. I saw him voice a little frustrations. I get it. He's trying, I guess. It's frustrating that the Sixers clearly need him to step up his game in a way that he's just not delivering on, but it's clear that it's wearing on everyone in this situation, and I am seeing Nick Nurse tighten up the leash a little bit. That Tobias was pulled just 3 minutes in that third quarter. Sat really during the meat of that game, and he ultimately was subbed back in towards the end of the third, but I do think that is noteworthy. That was unnormal from the typical substitution pattern of Nick Nurse, and we will see how things shake out from there. But as the roster talks as a whole, there is a need for the position with Mike Muscala. He is a guy that I think could be helpful on a contender, at least providing a couple minutes a game. There's obviously the backstory of him playing in Philadelphia before, the ties with Tyrese Maxey, and the Sixers do have an open roster spot to offer. So I do think the Oklahoma City Thunder are the greatest threat for prying him away from the Sixers, but I would put the chances of Muscala actually signing with Philadelphia above 50% at this point. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of conversations about what his goals are, what he wants as far as play time, what he wants as far as contending for a championship contender, all those things. So we will see how things shake out. But I do want to hear from you guys. What's your mindset with Mike Muscala? Does it feel like this is the storybook ending that the team needs? That's kind of where my mind's at, so let me know if you agree. Make sure that you're smashing that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video, and let me know all your thoughts in the comments. I also will be dropping a video talking specifically about Ricky Council IV later today, so stay posted for that one, and appreciate all you guys helping this Sixers Digest family grow. Peace.